O Claven, right-wing sexual icon, prince of all that is beautiful and king of all that is baldness. Wow, that's most of my titles. Many people have been complaining that Confederate monuments are being taken down and moved into museums, claiming that this is erasing U.S. history. Yet nobody is arguing that the Germans should leave up Nazi art and Nazi symbols in their original places. He goes on at great length about this. That's a fair question given the evil of slavery, but it's really not. It's not comparable. Slavery grew up out of the confrontation of civilized men with primitive men, and it was certainly an evil, but it was not something that was imposed on the uncivilized by the civilized. The uncivilized people were also holding slaves. Slavery had been something that was in civilization forever. It grew up naturally. It's very easy to see how great men like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington might hold slaves, and if not feel comfortable with it, at least feel that it was within the realm of normal behavior. I do not think, and the Confederacy was more complex than their slaveholding. It was more complex than that one issue. It was the notion of their freedom, of their keeping their culture, which I always think the left should have been in favor of that, right? If every culture is valid, why wasn't the culture of the South valid? So in other words, it is part of history. It's a natural part of history. How wonderful, how delightful it is that the logic of American freedom got us past slavery. That is a good and great thing and a beautiful thing about our Constitution, and the thought that went into it, that it led us away from evil, that it was impossible for us to maintain that evil. We tore ourselves apart to come closer to our principles and getting rid of that evil. But we shouldn't erase all of history We shouldn't erase all of history just because we can't stand to look at that one facet of our history. That would be foolish. That would be Soviet rewriting the past, and I just don't believe in that. It is different to say that the Nazis who grew up and were the worst manifestation of the worst part of European thought and lasted for a decade and were there and were destroyed Europe and were destroyed themselves and destroyed everything. It's another thing. You don't want to forget them, but you don't want to memorialize them. It's very different. The Confederacy was much more complex than the evil of slavery. Hitler was not more complex than the evil of Hitler. And so I just don't think the two things are comparable. As evil as I think slavery was, I think the Confederacy was far more complicated. It's a part of some of the nobility of guys like Robert E. Lee and people like that can be praised, and certainly as a very essential part of our history, it's important and should be remembered and it shouldn't be written away. We're sensible enough to remember without going back into the worst parts of it.